125 neurologists at Duke Medical Center agree that Dr. Richard Arno was healed by a divine power. No one in history up to that point had survived this type of viral encephalitis. Next, on this edition of It's Supernatural.
Life after death experiences and angelic communications are on the increase. Terminally ill patients whom doctors have given no hope are unexplainably cured. People are being mysteriously protected from natural disasters. Sid Roth, your investigative reporter, examines this invisible world on It's Supernatural.
Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. Christmas week, 1972. Dr. Richard Arno, you had pain like you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the entire week, right before, leading up to Christmas, we were very active in the church, a lot of things going on, and I started having headaches that I could only be described as worse than a migraine, so much that I couldn't function. I remember on Christmas Eve we had a communion service scheduled, and I was in so much pain. I said to my mother and father who were visiting, I cannot do this communion service. We had over 300 people scheduled to come for candlelight and communion service the night before Christmas, and I was in so much pain. And she said, well, let me pray for you. And she prayed, and you know, Sid, the pain left, and it was gone throughout the entire communion service. And when I shook the hand of the last person at leaving, I was right back on my knees again. I had that pain, and it was so bad I would lay on the couch and press against my head and push my feet against the other end of the couch with all my might just to get some relief from some of the pain.
Had you ever had pain like that before?
Sid, I was only 30 years old. I was perfectly healthy. I'd never had any kind of medical problems. And I don't know what was going on. Some say stress, whatever, but I just know that I had this terrible pain. I was taking over-the-counter sinus caplets, pain pills, and things like that, but nothing seemed to be able to help. And this carried out throughout Christmas Day, and the next day, when I remember as my parents were leaving, that I just couldn't wait for them to drive on out of the driveway so I could go back and lay down and push against the top of my head some more to get some relief.
Why didn't you just go to a doctor?
I don't know. I'm not sure that I was a United Methodist pastor at the time. I'm not sure that I was really into the things of the Spirit. I didn't particularly believe in healing. I believed in church community and these kinds of things. And I was a really good man, and I was a good minister.
But why didn't you go to a doctor?
I was a good pastor. I don't know, Sid. I kept thinking that this is going to go away. 2 more aspirins, 2 more Excedrins or whatever, and this is going to go away. I can beat this thing.
So you were saying goodbye to your parents?
Yeah, they left. I went back in, laid down on the couch. They drove all the way from North Carolina back to Ohio. And I remember just kind of making it through the rest of that morning, but about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, now from here on has to be as it was told to me, because at 1 o'clock in the afternoon I went into a coma. And that my family found me in the back hall at the parsonage, just banging, literally just banging from one wall to the other. They heard noises.
But I think of a coma of someone just out. Yours was a little different type.
Yeah. There's kind of like walking pneumonia. There's kind of a walking coma. You're in so much pain that your arms are moving. You're muttering and yelling or whatever. And I think a lot of people could do something to harm themselves while they're in that coma, and nobody would even know they were in a coma. They took me about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the day after Christmas, to the first hospital, and there's a few doctors in there looked at me and said, he's on drugs. He's on drugs. Just take him home, let him sleep it off. Went to another hospital, and they said, he's drunk. And they said, he doesn't drink. He's a pastor. He doesn't drink. He doesn't take drugs.
You could have died between these 2 hospitals.
I most certainly could have died. They took me to the third one. I walked in, and there was a neurologist sitting there writing up papers or something.
But wait a second. Now, your family must have told them that that you didn't drink, you weren't on drugs, and they didn't investigate further?
No, they did not. They just said, well, that's what we think's wrong with him. He's just on drugs, and he just needs to come sleep it off.
All right. So you go to the third hospital.
Walked in the door. they walked me in. Of course, I was still walking, but I had to be led because I have no memory of this at all. I was in a full 100% coma. But they said there was a neurologist sitting there writing up something, and he looked over when I walked in the door. He just glanced over at me, and he pointed at me, and he said, "That man is in a coma. And you better get him to Duke University right now." And so they took me from Greenville, North Carolina to Duke, which is Durham, about 100 miles. And they took me into Duke Medical Center, emergency. They gave me a spinal tap, an EEG, EKGs, and all the tests that go with them. And they said he not only has spinal meningitis, well, it was in its latter stages then, but he also has a brain disease called encephalitis, viral encephalitis.
What is that?
It's where your brain actually swells up against the skull, and it knocks you out. You're comatose. It just the pain becomes so great. Your body and your brain go into a defense mechanism,
That pain
and it just knocks you out.
That pain must have been awful before you were knocked out. I guess the pain knocked you out from what you're telling me.
Yeah, the pain became so great. Well, here's my brain swelling, and I'm thinking it's sinus. My brain was swelling up against my skull. So you can see, and that's why when I was pushing down, I was getting what I felt was a little bit of relief. And there's some nerves up there that would kind of kill some of the pain on the top of your skull. And so they took me then and they put me in isolation because, bear in mind, I still had spinal meningitis, which is very contagious. So they took me to what they call 3 West. It's where they put you to die. It's where they put you to keep you as comfortable as you can until you die.
What was the prognosis of this particular disease?
They said, they told my parents that there had been that I was number 31. Prior to me, there were 30 known cases in the United States.
So it was a pretty rare disease.
Very rare, this particular kind of encephalitis. 30 known cases prior to me. Out of that, 26 of the people died while they were still in a coma. They never come out of the coma. They
Doesn't
just
sound
expired.
too good.
Not good.
Only 4 people survive.
And out of those 4, they all 4 had massive brain damage. 2 were presently at that point in time were in nursing homes being fed mostly by tube and through the vein. 2 were being cared for at home. They could eat if they were spoon fed. They had enough motor functions left that they could chew and swallow.
But not
they
much
didn't
of
know who they were. They had no memory. They were just like a little baby or a vegetable just sitting there just being fed and their diaper changed.
Well, did they have some new drugs or something? Because the first 30 they didn't do too well with.
No, actually, as we move through this thing, I think that you and the audience are going to find it wasn't drugs at all. What happened was about 150 people from my church came over and met with my parents, and they formed a large prayer circle down in the lobby at Duke University Medical Center. And they were hand in hand praying for God to heal me. And in the middle of that, my senior chief doctor, what would they call him now, the primary care physician, I think, but the chief doctor in charge of my case come over and he tapped my dad on the shoulder while they were praying. And Dad looked around and he said, "Come here." And Dad come over to him and he said, "You people are fools. You people are fools standing out here praying like this. If you believe there's a God, then surely you must believe he's a God of mercy. Then you ought to be praying for that boy to die." And that's when he told him about the other 30 cases. He said, "Look, your son is number 31, and he hadn't got a prayer." He said the most merciful thing could happen for that boy would be for him to die tonight, to die before he ever comes out of the coma. And second to that, he's going to live. He's 30 years old. He has a perfectly healthy physical body, but his brain is destroyed. See, he said it hemorrhaged up here on the top. It hemorrhaged right here over my right temple and just at the base of my brain. Massive pools of blood on my brain. My memory was gone. My ability to think and remember and decipher, all that.
How did your dad respond to that doctor's prognosis?
Well, when he told him, he said, you know, you're making fools of yourselves. You're fools. He said you should pray for him to die. Then my dad looked at him, and of course my dad's a Christian. He loves the Lord, and so did my mother. And Dad looked at him and he said, "Doctor, my God heals. My God heals." My God heals. What powerful words. He was standing on his faith. And he said it, my God heals. And he turned around from the doctor and he went back and started praying some more. Well,
Good for him.
Good for him. The next day.
I mean, the doctor wasn't going to help you.
No, they couldn't.
There was only one person that can help you, and that's a miracle from God.
They wanted to help me, but there's nothing you can do. It's irreversible. I had brain damage. My brain was bleeding. My temperature was 108 degrees and stayed 108 for 3 days. There wasn't anything they could do.
What does
108
degrees mean to a human?
Well, 105 is brain damage. Your brain at 105 is frying like on a skillet. It's frying like an egg at 105. So 108, it's burning. It's literally burning on the skillet, and you have no prayer. 108 degrees. There's no way to come out with 108 and not be scathed, mentally damaged.
Okay, they prayed. There's no hope from medical science. I mean, you couldn't even put it on a scale of 1 to 100. You weren't even on 1.
At that point, medical science was saying, yes, pray for death. That was where they were at. And so that afternoon, my father and mother went up to the doctor, and they said, doctor, we want to go in and see our son. Now, bear in mind now that I was in isolation. It was a little room about 8 foot by 6 foot. With a little bed and a little sink in there. They had a porthole about this big around, and my family could look at me through the porthole. They had me strapped down with a 6-inch leather strap on my right arm, one right here on my left arm, one across my stomach, and one on my ankles. Because I was moving, I was again in this, what do you call that? A moving coma. I would have, if I could have got a hold of a nurse, I would have killed her and not had any memory of it whatsoever. If I could have jumped out of the third floor window, I may have, and not even known who I was or what I was doing.
So did your father settle for just looking at his son dying? Or
he said you can't go in there. He's in isolation. He said there's nothing you can do in there. If you want to pray for him outside. If you want to look at him through the porthole, but you're not going in that room. Well, my dad was a contractor from Ohio, a road contractor. And he was raised with some of the roughest, and he's not a man you'd want to toy with. And so my dad looked at him and he said, doctor, he called him by name. He said, I told you, I want to go in there and see my son.
Well, I think that his father had the right to see him. What do you think? You're not even going to have a chance, because we'll be right back and tell you what happened. Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. Oh, what a point to break. Dr. Arno is dying. No one up to that point had recovered from viral encephalitis. His father believed that he would be healed. The doctor called him a fool. He insisted on going into the room with his son. Did he succeed?
Well, the doctor finally, when Dad looked at the doctor and he said, I told you I want to go in. And the doctor said, okay, I'm not going to fight you over this. The boy's in isolation. What he has is very contagious. You cannot take this in or out of this hospital. You have to agree to 2 things. Number 1, you go in there, you've got to put on all of the medical isolation equipment, the booties, the hat, the mask, the gloves, the whole thing. And so him and my mother dressed for that. He said the other condition is, and I'm holding you to this, and that is, do not touch that boy. And Dad said, well, that's okay. I don't mind.
Why didn't he want him to touch you?
Probably because of the
contagious.
The contagiousness. For whatever reason, he didn't. Well, actually, what the doctor said was he's in a lot of pain already, and if you touch a part of his body, it may send him into a rage.
I see.
Don't touch him. And so Dad said, okay, I won't touch him. So the doctor presented that it would hurt me if he touched me. Plus, I would assume the contagiousness. But Dad and Mom got dressed, and they went in, and Mother went over on one side of my bed, and she sat down there, and my dad was just standing up on the other side of the bed, and he said he's standing there with his arms in front of him like this, and just looking down at me. Sid, thinking what you and I might think if we were standing there looking at our baby. I was 30 years old, but I was their child. They were proud of me. I was the only one that made it through college. They were proud of me. I was a minister, and all the regrets Dad said that went through his mind, things he should have done, things that he shouldn't have done when I was a child. And there's so many things he wanted to tell me, but I couldn't, respond. Right. And he said as he stood there and all these feelings going through him, all of a sudden he heard the words in his heart, touch him. Well, that was, where did that come from? No, I'm not touching him.
He made a promise.
Promised the doctor I wouldn't do that. And he came back again, he says, I told you to touch him. And he said, God, is that you? If that's you, I can't touch him. You're telling me to break the promise. He said, if you touch him, I'll heal him.
Uh-oh.
If you touch him, I'll heal him. Well, Dad was in a quandary because
right.
He has a promise on one hand and a command from God on the other. And he said, well, God, he said, you're telling me to break a promise. And he said, I want you to know whether you're standing with them or me. Who's your hope in? The medical science, or is your hope in me, your creator? And Dad said, my hope's in you. He said, then touch him. So Dad, like a little child, pulled his hands up like this, and he started, and I was laying flat, I was strapped down to the bed. And he said, he started stretching out his hands and reaching them down towards me. And Mom just was watching him like, what are you doing? And he said he got about an inch away, and the room just filled with the presence of God. Dad and Mom described it as Shekinah glory. Mom just stood up, and she's just looking around. And they said it was like nothing they had ever experienced in their entire life. The presence of God was so great.
It was tangible.
It was tangible. They could feel it. They could see it. It was a bright light. It was a warm glow. And they just both got up without saying a word, and they backed out of the room. And they went immediately. They rushed down to the church people and everyone, and they said, God is in the room with him right now. He is in that room. And we don't know whether he's here to take him or if he's here to heal him. But Dick Arno is in the hands of God this very second. And they waited. They waited. They went to the chapel, they prayed, and they waited. And about 12 hours later, I don't know how to put this any more emphatic than to just say, I woke up. What precious words. I woke up. We wake up every morning, Sid. We take it so for granted.
Take it for granted.
But not me.
No
From
guarantee.
Now on,
no guarantee anyone's going to wake up.
No, sir. It's a miracle to wake up in the morning. And when I get up in the morning, I say, God, thank you for bringing me safely through the night and giving me a new day to live.
Richard,
for you.
Richard, there's someone that needs to hear that. Will you look at the camera and tell them that same thing again?
It's true. You get up in the morning, you take it for granted. Every morning, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. But it's a miracle that you're protected throughout the night, and you wake up in the morning and you're alert and alive and have a new chance to serve God.
You were alert and alive?
There was a doctor in the room when I woke up, and I'm looking around. And of course, this is 7 days later. I don't know where I'm at. And I see this man standing over by the sink, and I said, hi. And he looked back over his shoulder, and he kind of ignored me. And he said, where am I? And he looked at me again. He said, you're at Duke University Medical Center. You're a very sick man. He thought I was just in my coma, and I was just murmurings of someone that was in a coma. And I said, well, who are you? He said, I'm one of your doctors. And I said, where am I? Or no, I'd already asked that. And then I said, where? What day is it? Was my next question. And then he stopped what he was doing. And he turned around and looked at me. These are pretty good questions. Where am I? Who are you? What day is it? These were sane questions. These weren't murmurings. And he looked around at me and he said, do you know your name? I said, sure, I know my name is Richard Arno. I'm pastor of Salem United Methodist Church.
You're not supposed to be doing this, Richard.
No. And he said, were you ever in the military? And I said, yes, I was in the Army, a sergeant, serial number RA136677496. He said, do you know your Social Security number? And I said, 270-38-85-35. And he said, I'll be right back. He went out that door and said there must have been 18 doctors in that little spot. They were examining me and talking to me and looking at me.
They should have had every doctor in the hospital there at Duke.
They rushed me into EEG. They did all of their tests, and they could not find a single trace where I had ever had spinal meningitis or encephalitis. 0 brain damage, not 1 cell. My EEG went from disastrous to perfect in a matter of hours.
Now, they just happened to be having a conference of neurologists. Tell me about
well,
that.
One of my doctors, the same doctor that called my dad out of the prayer, he said, we have neurologists in from all over the world.
The one that called your dad a fool?
A fool.
Okay.
He said, we have neurologists in from all over the world, and what we'd like to do, we're having a big seminar here, and we'd like to use your case as a study for them to try to make a determination as to what we did that healed you. What did we do right here? What medicine worked? So he said, would that be all right with you? And I said, well, sure, it's fine with me. So they made photocopies of all of my medical records, and it was stacks. And they presented up to, but not to supersede, I mean, up to my point of the healing.
Yes.
My last blood pressure, my last reports right up to that moment. And they made photocopies and passed them out to all of them. And their assignment was to spend, I think, 1 to 3 hours reading and getting some background on this case. And then they asked for a vote. They said, what is what is Mr. Arno's present condition? And just about 100%.
So they had no knowledge, though.
None at all.
They just had your charts.
Just my charts up to that point. And they said, now, we want to know, as neurologists, what do you consider that his present situation or position is? And they agreed that I was dead.
Was it 100%?
Pretty much. They never gave me that. They just said most agreed that I was dead.
That you were dead.
Dead. That I never survived. And a few others felt that I was still in a coma and still in the hospital as a patient.
Did they tell them that you were really alive?
Mm-mm. Never said a word.
After, did they tell you?
No. That what they did is they pre-told me that when we come over and knock on this door.
Excuse me. So in other words, they voted that you're a dead man.
Either dead or still in a coma.
So what happened next?
They come over, and I was standing out in the hall, and they told me when we knock on the door, you walk in with carrying your IVs.
Oh no!
So they walked over and went like this to the door, and here's this amphitheater filled with these neurologists. They walk over, and I hear these click click, somebody knocking. So I opened up the door, and I walk in carrying my IVs, and they stood up. No, this is impossible. There is no way that this man is walking in carrying his IVs. And so they started asking me questions, and they queried me for about 3 hours, just asking me questions about who am I, what do I do, what's my history, what's my medical history, what kind of medications was I taking over the counter, what kind of medications are they giving me here, the whole 9 yards. But the one thing that stood out was that I was a minister. And so they told me to go on back to my room after all this, and I went back and I just enjoyed a nice lunch or whatever. And then 3 men walked in my room, and they said to me, and I'm pretty much quoting, and this is all still documented. It has to be on the records of Duke University. But they said, we are here because they have concluded their research or the findings on this, and they've sent us, the 3 of us here, to talk with you, to let you know what our findings were. There's 2 primary things that they told us that they wanted to accomplish with you. They said, 1, we want you to know in layman's terms. They feel, the body of neurologists feel that you have a right to know in layman's terms what happened to you. And they said, it's as though you cut your arm off, took 2 aspirins, laid down for a nap, and grew a new arm.
That's called a miracle, doctor.
That's a pretty good miracle.
Were they saying that was a miracle?
Then this same doctor that called my dad a fool, he said the second thing they wanted you to know, and I'm not sure he participated in this, but the second thing that those neurologists wanted you to know was that in their opinion you were healed by an act of divine power. And I said, will you put that on my charts? And he said, I will, sir.
Well, what do you think about that? I'd say that is as authentic a documented miracle as you have ever heard of in your life. But I'm reminded of another fool. King David says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. You'd have to be a fool. You see creation, it shouts creator. But to know this God, you must believe in the Jewish Messiah, Yeshua, that's the Hebrew name for Jesus. If you repent of your sins and turn towards the blood of Yeshua, he will wash it away, and God will become real to you. You will have intimacy with him. You won't even contemplate the word fear, because in his presence is intimacy, peace, love, and joy. Isn't that what your heart is crying for? As soon as this telecast is over, you do business with the living God, because he's told me he loves you. He's calling you right now. This is your moment. Don't miss it.